Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to another episode of Fan Team Radio. I am your host Shayem Khan, joined as always by my co-host Chris Odorizzi. Today we're breaking down Netherlands 2023 at Zandvoort. We'll talk about how the rain helped and hurt teams across the grid and expose flaws in Mercedes, Ferrari, and McLaren's tire strategies. We'll talk about Liam Lawson's impressive first outing and how Alonso used his experience to help him get back on the podium. Chris, what's up?
Hey, Sham. Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm right here back in LA. As soon as a little bit of rain starts falling on the track, everyone starts driving like crazy, and no one
Oh
can
yeah.
sort of seem to figure out what is they're doing. And it kind of it always baffles me that when these little things happen, these professional teams just sort of seem to not know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, when it's a dry, nice day, everyone looks somewhat swell, but as soon as the rain starts coming down, it exposes the little details that everyone seems to miss. So we'll get into that today. So Chris, let's hop into it. What are your thoughts on the weather and how it affected today's grid?
Yeah, I mean the rain started almost immediately, and we talked a little bit right before this podcast about how there just wasn't a team that maybe could have gambled starting on a wet tire, which was you brought that up point, and I didn't even really think about it until that moment. But the rain was like pelting down by the time they were at the first few turns, so that sort of seems like someone had to have known, right? They have all the sophisticated technology, have the radar, they probably have people standing like off in the distance figuring out where it's going to rain and
Apple
just
weather, it's on
yeah, just
every single phone.
yeah. So like it just baffles me that no one took that gamble. Like obviously you have to make that call a little bit earlier during the formation lap and all that kind of stuff, but still they knew the rain was coming and but still even though nobody made that gamble, it still was like Perez was the first to pit. I'm actually surprised that they didn't pit Max first. Maybe they wanted to see how it goes, but Max could have easily lost tons of places, hydroplane slid off, whatever. But I was expecting everybody just to slam into the pits at the same time. And then we just have people doing all these crazy tire strategies that make no sense. Yeah, it's kind of shocked. We looked to have like a really good start to the race in terms of we had Lando up there, we had Albon in P4, Alonso in P5, and it kind of looked like we were going to have this new shakeup that we haven't had in a while, and then the rain just came
Took it
down
up
and
even
threw
more.
threw a bomb. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually super surprised that none of the you know back of the grid teams like Alfa Romeo and Williams or Logan Sargent at least decided to go with the interest to start the race. You don't really have a whole lot to lose knowing that at some point there is going to be some rain. The fact that they didn't forecast that the weather was going to come in lap 1, 2 really does surprise me. I feel like our weather technology is sophisticated enough to at least pick up on that. If retrospect is you can get a lot of value in retrospect. In retrospect, I would think that some of those bottom teams would start with inters, because after lap 2, if you take another look at the grid lineup, the bottom third of all those drivers, including Perez due to his pit stop, were all switching on to inters. And by lap 3, lap 4, you had Zhou Guan Yu up in P4, Gasly up in P5. So it was only a matter of laps before, George Russell was, getting overtaken by Perez, and everyone who decided to stay with the soft tires was just getting lapped. Hamilton started on medium tires, which I still am trying to figure out what happened. But I guess that leads into, I guess that leads into our next, topic pretty seamlessly. So the weather was, taken advantage of by Alonso and Red Bull, objectively. But certain teams seemed like they just didn't have the strategy on hand as it was needed and executed on time to get their drivers into an advantageous position. And those three teams that stick out to me were Mercedes, McLaren, and Ferrari. Chris, what were your thoughts on those three teams' tire strategies? Did you think that had they pitted 1 or 2 laps earlier alongside Perez, that maybe those teams would be in, near the top of the podium? Or do you think that irregardless of what happened, you know, Red Bull and Alonso were gonna, no matter what, just dominate.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, like, listen, as soon as the rain starts pelting down, you either have to, like, with how bunched up the pack is going to be in the early of the race, you got to throw someone in the pits if you're going to make the tire change. Otherwise, you're double stacking and things of that nature. So, and staying out on a wet track, especially a heavily wet track on soft tires, you're going to lose an insane amount of lap time. I don't like on lap 2, there was like a shot after Perez had dived into the pits where like Max and all these guys are like going around the track and they just look like they're absolutely crawling. And you're going to lose so much time. So it's so shocking to me that some of these teams decided to do a third lap and just kind of hang it out. Like maybe they thought like Zandvoort dries out real quick and all this, and maybe we could just weather the storm. And then these guys are going to have to pit off inters, and we'll just stay on the softs. But they're losing over a pit stop's worth of time just staying out on soft. So the pit is negated. So just put them on the inters and get them out there. So yeah, I don't know what Mercedes and McLaren were thinking. Like McLaren did an extra lap on the softs. Mercedes with Russell didn't pit till lap 4. And that's why all of a sudden his quote unquote forecasted podium slipped beneath his fingers. By the way,
A lot of weather puns today.
A lot of weather, but I can't hang with him sometimes, but you know, it is what it is. But you know, like
I mean, I agree with you. I think Mercedes and McLaren suffered from being trigger shy for this race, whereas Ferrari absolutely pulled a gun on themselves as they do every week. So, you know, Ferrari wasn't even ready for the inters to change, and it was embarrassment of blunders to see them kind of just squander away what I thought was a great race for Sainz. I thought he was, you know, at the end of the race, he held Lewis Hamilton back across 2 laps to get in. I believe that he came in at P5.
Yeah, P5, yeah.
Yeah, P5, yeah. So, you know, and then Leclerc, you know, the saddest man on the grid, ended up having to retire his car due to the front wing damage that ultimately went underneath his car and damaged his car and just kind of got him out. It's look, like, you know, Mercedes and McLaren, this is a make the decision at the right time problem, whereas Ferrari is operational problems. Man, which is you know, whether it's raining or it's not, they seem to succumb to the same issues week over week.
I can't, like, go back to your point about Ferrari not being ready. It's just one of those things that you just keep looking when it's happening, and even though you know that this team is a giant disaster, this keeps happening, you just have like a jaw to the ground and you're like, there's rain coming down, we know what's going on, how do you not have these inters in handed ready to go? These guys are just fumbling over themselves, like trying to bring the tires out. These
and
guys
I wonder where the accountability is too. Like, you know, when something goes, you know, wayside with Mercedes or McLaren, you know, you'll see Zach come in and say something, or Toto be like, you know, really vocal about it, and you know, even Toto went on to Instagram and posted the fact that they, you know, they had they miscalculated their stops. So at least there's some sort of public accountability that the teams and the leaders there, you know, show when they do make a mistake like this. With Ferrari, man, I've tried to scour through a lot of different articles, all third-party articles talking about Ferrari, but nothing from Ferrari taking accountability onto themselves. And it leads me to believe, like, maybe it's the homogenous nature of everyone that Ferrari tends to hire that is now kind of biting them in the butt. You know, you have all these other programs, Williams especially, where they're able to poach different kinds of talent from different teams or even from lower formulas, but they're an amalgam of different talents and different people that, you know, are able to share and contradict each other to get their team in a fighting position. Whereas I feel like Ferrari, it's all in an echo chamber, and everyone is either agreeing against the waves, or they're disagreeing on the same things altogether. And that might seem well and great on paper. You want a team to be fully, on board with everything, but I think they're lacking the accountability, or maybe they're just scared, right? So I think, after watching Ferrari for a couple of years now and seeing what they look like in a decent position, they are essentially in a place where I think culture is affecting them above anything else. And we've talked about culture and team cultures a lot on the show, Chris, in terms of, what to expect from something like Red Bull, what to expect from something like Mercedes, even now with Aston Martin, what to expect, from them. And we saw examples of this, right, Chris, when I forgot what's his face was heading up Williams. Who's their last team principal?
Yas. Oh, wait,
Yeah, yeah. Just like he wasn't able to instill like a culture that people could buy into. So, he was in and out real quickly. Um, I think James Val, now in that position is able to start creating a culture very similar to Mercedes, but unique in its own way. And I think, just going back to it, it is the culture of the team that I think is exposed more than anything else in situations like this.
yeah, absolutely. I definitely think we've talked before about Ferrari's sort of like institution, and I think that that's really biting them in the butt, as you said. Like they don't take accountability. They have to, always have an outward perception of perfection. Their cars are perfect. Their company is perfect. Their image is perfect. And so if something goes wrong, it's like not Ferrari's fault. It's an external thing, a different thing that's going on. So, and like you said, I think a lot of these teams are exposing their culture. And I think someone like James is showing how culture can change a team dynamic very quickly. James has come in, he's been very transparent with Williams. He talks a lot about things that other teams wouldn't divulge. Like he's been very vocal and transparent about like what happened with Logan's car and what's happened in other races. And most teams would keep a lot of that close to the chest, but James is doing a really good job at making shifts and allowing people to like step up and empowering people to actually take charge and do these kind of things. And so, yeah, like these kind of races like really show people's weaknesses and strengths. And I think, the people with good experience, good decision making abilities, people quick to think, like, Alonso, really experienced driver and all that, quick to think and, put him up there. So I definitely think that we have
I I do have two more just thoughts on this. So going back to the homogenous kind of culture of Ferrari, I think a good example that shows, where impact is had is someone who's outside of that circle, Carlos Sainz, a Spaniard, vocal, knows, has the conviction in his racing abilities and the decision making abilities out there to say something. Whereas, I think Leclerc, as talented as he is a company man, and I think Ferrari just wants a unit of company men and possibly women, but it seems like uh that's just kind of a subterfuge they're just stuck in. And the second point I wanted to make is you see James Vals and Mike Crack not just take their expertise to these other teams, but also take that culture that they know it will, fortified Mercedes and try to put, use that as like their foundation to build on and find their unique kind of brand, right? I am curious to see, right now, no one wants to leave Red Bull. They're the top of the pack. They're doing great. It's going to take a lot of money way above market value for smaller teams to poach away any Red Bull talent. But I feel like if Red Bull goes down a similar kind of legacy period that the Mercedes just had of like year over year of success, then at a certain point, these talents, in the engineering departments and other parts of Red Bull, they're going to start finding more, attractive offers that aren't so high above market value. So I think when that happens, I'd be curious to see what some of those cultures start looking like. Like let's say, if someone from Red Bull right now were to go over to to Alpine, I'd be curious to see if the entire trajectory of Alpine's organization starts to resemble a lot of what worked for Red Bull. So it's just, speculation right now, but like I mentioned several episodes ago when James Allison was reinstated as the Mercedes uh tech
Okay.
principal, essentially, like now we're seeing, we're starting to see how they're starting to pivot, even though the pivot is a bit slower than most Mercedes fans want. We're starting to see the kind of the upgrades that come along with the shift in leadership.
Yeah,
So, just something to think about when we start seeing, eventually talents at Red Bull also starting to go into smaller teams.
my one top off to that real quick will just be actually I haven't heard the latest on this lately, but I hope we get to see Mattia at Alpine or in another team because it would be really good to see someone who was leading the Ferrari charge and not able to blossom, see what they're like in a different team.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Chris.
Yeah. So I
It's like
because
seeing the other side of the coin on that one. That's a really good, yeah. I'd be curious
un
to see that too.
unleashing his talent and seeing what he can actually do would be pretty cool.
Yeah. No. Great thoughts there. All right, let's pivot to something more exciting. This is actually something that I was paying attention to pretty much the whole race was Liam Lawson. Kid came in, did his thing, beat out Yuki Tsunoda. He did it under duress in terms of, the not just the weather, but the amount of time that he had to prepare with Daniel's injury. Give me your thoughts. Talk to me about Liam, Chris.
By the way, did you randomly see the Max Verstappen when he took the camera away from McLaren? It was like recording on their social media. He did this little thing where he like pointed it at different drivers. He was and Max like stole the show, and he interviewed Liam Lawson for a moment and said like, "Hey, you ready for the race? You excited about this?" And you could totally visibly see Liam was nervous as shit. Like he was scared. There's a little anxiety. You could tell he was like, "Oh my god, I'm about to be in my first F1 race." And it's wet and all this stuff. Like Liam super impressed me. Most rookies put it in the wall, especially if it's wet. And I think I read somewhere this was Liam's first time to ever be on an inter tire ever. Like he is
Yeah.
just so the fact that he comes in, keeps it on track in probably one of the most difficult races that you could do because Zandvoort's a difficult track. There's a lot of banking turns, and then you go from dry to wet to dry to wet, but and keep it on and not only do that, but perform better from the very back of the grid than a 3-year experienced driver in the team. Like insanely impressive. I can't wait to see more of him and see what he can do after he feels a little bit more comfortable in the car.
Yeah, showing signs of our hero Nick DeVries, just like I'm kidding, I'm kidding. I'm
Yeah,
not gonna
yeah.
Liam. But yeah, I think an incredible race. He was at times back in P15, which was expected. Sargent was out, Russell was out, Leclerc was out, so that did definitely help him get up a little bit in the standings. But if you break it down, man, the kid I think at one point he was up in P10, P11, fighting for points. And he beat out, like I said, Kevin Magnussen fair and square. He beat out Yuki Tsunoda fair and square. He beat out your boy Valtteri fair and square. And it wasn't by like just a couple of microseconds. His difference against Kevin K-Mag was damn near 5 seconds, 6 seconds. I mean, if that's look, I made the joke about Nick, but I think we're still need to see a little bit more from Liam to really get the conviction behind him. But he's been doing the supercar series out in Japan. Obviously, that's been helping keep his sword sharp. And I think he also brings with him a sense of maybe likability, like that Nick was missing, and a sense of likability that maybe Logan hasn't really tapped into just because he's been so stressed.
Right.
But I think if Liam keeps his foot on the pedal and has a really great showing in a dry race, especially, I think he solidifies himself in that AlphaTauri seat more so than Daniel. I think unfortunately for Daniel, he came in, broke his hand, and immediately had to come out. I think Liam's just going to take those lemons and make lemonade out of it, and so I have high hopes for him. I do, want to temper that a little bit with what what we saw from Nick, and make sure that we don't put so much expectations on a rookie that's outlandish and maybe not appropriate. But definitely something to that excited me watching this entire race is seeing Liam come in and just absolutely perform way above above his weight class, I guess.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on Liam? Do you think that he is going to be a viable D2 now? I guess a better way to ask that is, how long does he need to persist in this kind of successful way to convince Helmut Marko and the entire leadership there to pivot to him as opposed to bringing Daniel back?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing because like AlphaTauri has a really unique opportunity here, right? Like they had Nick, they decided to get rid of him for Daniel, and Daniel kind of came out, was immediately started to at least show, and then has this unfortunate accident. But here's this guy that has been in the Red Bull Junior program, and he gets this opportunity. So now they get to sort of see him perform over a couple of races. I'm not sure how long Daniel's recovery is expected to take, but it's definitely going to be an interesting decision for guys like Helmut Marko if what happens if Liam performs in Monza and then continues to perform to the next race if Daniel's not ready. Do they make the switch back to Daniel? I'm not sure what his contract says, but maybe they do give this kid a shot. I mean, Daniel, he's already kind of past his prime from an age perspective, from a performance perspective, and they got this young junior coming in that if he's going to show performance, maybe they put him in the seat. So, like, I think only time will tell, but it's definitely a great start. I mean, Nick kind of had the same thing and then never capitalized, but I see a lot more potential in Liam than I did Nick. And as much as I love Danny Rick, he kind of just sort of seems to have a series of bad luck, some that he brings upon himself and some just by accident. But if Liam keeps performing, I don't know if they'll go back to Danny, but we'll see.
Another thing to consider is you don't want to be in a Alpine Oscar Piastri situation where other teams get a whiff of your young talent and then they start doing backdoor deals, with agents and with managers to, slight you out. I think Red Bull is shrewd enough of an organization to appreciate that as well. Now, yeah, you've shown your young driver off to the world, but until you contractually wrap him up, another team could come in and fuck around, and find out. So that's another thing that it's all exciting for Liam Lawson right now. I think he just needs to keep his temper going the right way, keep it even keeled, and really show his stuff on a race that's not heavily impacted with rain. On the other side of that, though, maybe on a regular race day with dry racing conditions and ideal racing conditions, some of those other racers are going to be able to show their stuff off too. So there is that balance that I really do need to see a little bit more of to just really make that full conviction that that Liam is going to be the D2 driver. I still think that Danny has a little bit of room to come in and really establishes himself as a D2 driver. I believe he was seeing the same surgeon for his hand that Lance Stroll saw, and I think Lance came back in a matter of a week or a week and a half to race again. So hoping is nothing too serious. Definitely want to see Daniel Rick do a couple more races at least to see. I'm just curious to see what his potential is.
Wait, hold up here. Does Yuki have a signed contract for next year? Because maybe we have a Danny Rick, Liam Lawson situation going on here. If
I mean, then if we pull on that string, then that assumes that they're not going to just let Yuki go. I think Yuki's been performing very well in a substandard car. And they really have no reason to let go of Checo, as much as the narrative is saying like, hey, like we'll find another driver. Checo's still number 2 in the point standings. He doesn't there's no contention between him and Max really. He's staving off drivers. So he's not, ruining the car every weekend. So I mean, for all intents and purposes at the moment, Checo seems to be doing the job fine. whether they're going to let Yuki kind of come in, and if there's enough upside to bring him in to kind of mess with that equation, that's left to be seen.
Well,
But
I'll make my statement that Zuki. I think Yuki has a 0% chance of ever sitting in a Red Bull seat. And, maybe I'm wrong, but his temper, his attitude, and, the Red Bull car is a lot more oversteery than the AlphaTauri. I think Yuki will crash it more often. And I just don't think Max and his organization will put up with someone's attitude like Yuki. I haven't heard him screaming on the radio as much as he used to, but
I
like
don't
you
think
said,
Yuki. I don't think Yuki will make a peep if he gets into the Red Bull car. I don't think he will open his mouth one bit other than saying, "Yeah, that sounds good," or
thank
staying
you.
silent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, because yeah, you don't go into a Christian Horner Helmut Marko team thinking that even Max doesn't talk. He talks back to Giancarlo, but like that's about it. He doesn't talk back to anyone else. It's just again, the culture of that team is such that you don't really talk back. Even as like a three-time world champ, and if Yuki sees that, I think he'll sure enough just fall in line. I don't like, I mentioned this episodes ago. I don't think Danny Rick is going to be realistically in that Red Bull driver's seat as much as people want to entertain it and kind of a cool thing to do. I just don't think it's in the cards for him anymore. I definitely do think he's a really souped up like placeholder, with a glorified placeholder for lack of better words. And I think, unfortunately his time in F1 I think is running short. But
Agreed.
if Julian Palmer, can come in and be like a commentator and only raced what, like 13 races or something, or 30 races in his career, Danny Rick can come in and fill in, a position like that really easily and really, be the star for like a broadcasting company that wants to, get into the F1 realm. Someone like ESPN even, so the future is still bright for Danny Ricciardo. I just don't think it's going to be in an F1 car.
Agreed.
All right, so let's go and talk about the old man on track, Fernando Alonso. Just unbelievable drive today. He at a certain point was creeping up on Max for the P1 position. I think he was only like maybe like 0.7, 0.6 seconds back at towards the end of the race of Max. Max obviously pulled away, but just goes to show that you know the experience that Fernando has, just under his belt when it comes to rain situations, to make preemptive calls, on the fly. That those were all on display this weekend, and the man put in the fastest lap at 1:13.837, and did it almost towards the end of the race. It just shows that he has so much bandwidth, especially when other drivers are under such pressure and duress. Really impressive stuff. What do you think about Fernando's race this weekend?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I kind of forgot a little bit about him before the race started, just because we've had such a resurgence with McLaren. There's been a lot of talk around Williams, and we had Alex Albon in P4, and Alonso had his string of podiums and sort of missed out a couple races, and I was just not even thinking of Aston Martin that much, and Lance Stroll doesn't do anything to sort of help that image.
I
So
mean, he's trying to go play in Wimbledon, so can't blame him too much.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, so at the start of the race, all of a sudden Fernando's like slotting up into, P3 and P2. And I'm just like, what the hell? Like, where was Fernando? And yeah, man, the guy just performed. He was a monster. And at the end of the race, like you mentioned, I actually think he could have taken a dive on Max, but I think he didn't want to risk the taking them both out. But I think there's potential, but he was creeping up on his gearbox there, and I thought maybe he was going to take that chance. It was a lot closer than I thought he was. So ultimately, just all around, like you said, the experience of this guy, the most experienced guy on the track. He's a champion, and he showed it today, just being able to super outclass all these guys. And he, like, honestly, he just deserves to be on the podium. And I'm super happy to watch this guy stand on the podium week after week, and I hope he can creep up there and maybe even pass Checo for P2, hopefully by the end of the year.
Yeah, just outstanding stuff. He earned every bit of it. And Max says that the weather didn't make it easy on them, but I think he could expand that to say the weather and Fernando didn't make it easy on us today. So great stuff from Fernando. Let's pivot to our winners of the week. So obviously Alonso is going to be on both of our dockets. Who else do you got, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, like I know we're gonna talk about this week after week, probably ad nauseum, but Max, I mean, Max just continually shows like in all conditions, wet, dry, changing of tires, all this stuff, like every condition, he's just a robot and he's able to basically make no mistakes. And he Max matched Seb's record, and I honestly he made the race exciting for me because I was like biting my teeth the whole race that he was going to hydroplane or someone would crash into him or just some random. I actually when the red flag came out at the end and they were going to do the restart, I was just like, don't have reliability problems, don't have any issues. Although I don't really want to see him get a win just by race classification at the end. But uh, yeah, this guy's just performing like a monster. And the last person I'll put up there is just Gasly. Like he kept it up there, like strong showing from him this week. And yeah, he got a little bit lucky with the Checo's penalty from speeding in the pit lane, which was from hydroplaning. It wasn't even his fault. He hydroplaned was too fast over the line, then hit the wall. And unfortunately, that just gave him a 5-second penalty. Them's the rules. So, but I don't know if you the difference between Max taking 9 wins in a row, which is him and Seb are the only two to ever done it. He's like, oh yeah, what a lovely race that was. And then Gasly's, yeah, it's
The
just such
beauty
a
of F1, man. It's
start.
the
Yeah.
nuances, like you can appreciate where every driver is within each team and where each team is. And it's just not something that you get so full frontal in a lot of American team sports and even like in soccer, like when the it's usually when the underdog wins, people are like up in hoorah. I guess March Madness has a lot of that, right?
Yep.
But yeah, in a lot of American sports, you don't really get to see what does a dynasty celebration look like as opposed to like a single off, to see like what that means to each team is kind of lost. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I have Gasly on my winner circle as well. Just very conservative race in the best ways possible, given that a lot could have gone wrong. He stacked up really well against Esteban, who had that really funny comment about being on full wets when everyone else was on inners. But yeah, I think like look, Gasly is making a name for himself in certain ways within that organization to potentially become D1 just based on his performance compared to Ocon. But Ocon also has a podium this year, so I think they're starting to right course the ship. It feels like. I think, like you mentioned, having Mattia on board would even help them get some more structure and potentially be in swinging mode for next year. So really good stuff from Gasly. Again, have Alonso on there, Liam, and then my favorite person best behind Lewis Hamilton and Toto Wolff is Alex Albon.
Yep.
Consistently just putting it in points position with a car that isn't, I guess not, it's not terrible, but it definitely isn't a front running car. They've made massive strides with their development, and I think he's the right one to show it all off. I believe he's met with pretty much all the grid team leaders in the past like 2 or 3 weeks, and so his future is bright. I am incredibly excited to see where this man will land, and if he lands in a place like we talked about earlier at Aston Martin, or even yeah, I guess Aston Martin, I think it would be the place where I'd see him do his best work, just because McLaren, those 2 seats are pretty much locked down. I don't want Ferrari to get anywhere near this person and ruin his career. So yeah, I think Alex just put in a great race. It in contrast to Logan, which probably makes us a little bit of a smooth transition into our losers of the week. I'm gonna go ahead first, Chris, and say Logan is not only my loser, but we'll get to this later. Also on my hot seat, seeing his kind of at times peaks in performance that he we really want to lean into and encourage, but then kind of just the pitfalls that he keeps going into. I know this week it was a hydraulics issue with his car, and he seemed incredibly distraught afterwards, just spending the entire time off track, and just with his head down and his helmet down, shades of Leclerc essentially. So uh, I'm gonna kick off our losers with Logan Sargent, Zhou Guan Yu. I didn't want to put him in the loser spot this week. I definitely think he had an incredible race. I think Alfa Romeo essentially, their pit stop strategy later in the race kind of got him into a mucky situation, and then with him running off track, there really wasn't no way to recover from that. Um, I'm gonna put Charles Leclerc in there. I feel like this is probably my sixth or seventh week putting this man in the loser seat. And then K-Mag. I definitely am disappointed with how K-Mag has been performing this year, especially compared to Nico. I know they both just signed contract extensions, which I'm gonna have you give your thoughts on, Chris, because it completely goes over my head. So I guess let's start there, Chris. What are your thoughts on the Haas drivers both re-up their contract with Haas? Do you think they made a mistake? Do you think Haas made a mistake? Or do you think that this is just the only option that they realistically had?
Honestly, like I was shocked at the same time, like you, like it doesn't compute for me. And I think I've maybe talked about this a little bit before, but I think the only thing that Haas cares about is drivers who don't crash their cars. I think that as long as they don't spend too much money, that's all they really care about.
Fair point.
It really doesn't seem like they have an incentive to try to win or to try to improve. We don't really like, we're seeing like Albon and James Vowles like push Williams forward. We're seeing Crack and like Alonso and Stroll like push Aston Martin forward. We never hear about like upgrades of the Haas and strategy from the Haas. I think they're just kind of there. And I think K Mag and Hulkenberg just like easy. Like, and I think that's ultimately like they don't want to
Yeah.
bring a rookie in. They don't have the budget and the money to get a superstar. So like what are their options? And I think it was just sort of like these guys are going to take the cars, get them around the track, maybe occasionally get some points, and that's what we need. So like I'm
Yeah.
not too shocked, but at the same time it's sort of like this is the pinnacle of motorsport. Like either be there or don't, and it's kind of hard to like see, but maybe they'll finally sell out to Andretti or something like that, and we'll get a shakeup. But yeah, it was just a little baffling to me, but also kind of expected at the same time.
It almost makes me feel bad that Alfa Romeo is the one that's getting bought out and not Haas.
Yeah, I don't think Gene wants to sell because I think it's profitable for him, and
I mean, how
it's
else
a
is he gonna wash his money?
yeah, exactly.
All right, Chris, who you got for your losers this week?
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about it already, but McLaren and Mercedes, like these guys had a a P2 and P3 in quali with Lando and George, and just completely, shit the bed, honestly. Like their tire strategy, their strategy with the rain, the decisions that they made, like this tire strategy with Russell that makes zero sense, like going and two extra laps on soft compared to anybody else, then throwing the inters on, then going back to softs for 6 laps, and then hards for like 40 something laps. Like I have no idea what their thought process was with George. As much as like I don't want him to make podiums, like I want Mercedes to succeed. I want Lewis to be back in a championship winning car. And so their team definitely needs to button up a little bit. And with their strategy department, we talked a little bit before the podcast about how they've had such a good performing car for so long. They haven't had to really have a strategy department because, Lewis can start P18 and just in his Brazil performance in 2021 when he like came for the back of the grid.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
amazing. And but like that they don't have that car anymore. So when it comes to making amazing strategy decisions, they just don't have that at the moment. So that needs to change. So I think McLaren, Mercedes both lost out on potential podiums today. And it was just there. And then my last loser will just be, Danny. Like I feel so bad for the guy. Like, when's the last time we've had a broken bone in Formula One? And his accident was fairly like minimal from a car crash standpoint. You know, you have guys like Guo Yu like upside down, flipping over barriers. Um, and then, you know,
You have
Danny
Romain Grosjean walking out of fire.
walking out of fire, like Alonso like getting airborne and flipping, like,
Yeah.
and then, you know, bless his heart, Ricardo, the nicest guy on the track, you know, sees Oscar Piastri and makes the decision to just, you know, choose to put his car on the wall instead of T-boning Oscar and potentially hurting or killing him. And so, and you know, just held on the wheel too long and you know, threw his hand into the side of the car, and you know, that's that. But so I just feel bad for the guy. He, you know, just got his smile back, and then you see this picture with him in the cast, and he's not smiling that much, and you're like, I feel bad for the guy, but it's just really unfortunate for him. But yeah, McLaren, Mercedes, they need to get better.
Yeah. And then who do you got in your hot seat this week?
It's Lance. Lance, the disparity between Alonso and him is just really starting to show. And I think Alonso like proved again that their car is good enough. If you have someone capable behind the wheel, I know we felt like maybe they lost a little bit of that and McLaren was outshining them, but you know, the experience behind the wheel of the car showed that you can get a podium again. And I just don't like Lance is nowhereville. He's not getting any points. Aston could be doing so much better. So I hope he does take out tennis.
I hope so too. You know, maybe he's a really good tennis player and he's like the phenom that this generation needs, right?
Yep.
Yeah, my hot seat again, I have Logan Sargent. You know, rookie season, but we've seen both ends of the spectrum of the rookies this year in Nick DeVries and in Oscar Piastri. And Sargent, I think, is leaning, you know, he was in the middle for the longest time, and then I think with Liam coming in and showing up, it really has pushed Logan closer to the Nick DeVries end of the spectrum than it did, you know, the Liam Lawson side of things and the Oscar Piastri side. So I think he'll probably get one more racing season because I don't think Williams is as shrewd as Red Bull is with their driver pairings and kicking people out. But I think he will have to make an incredible improvement consistently over the next last half of this season, going into next season, for Williams to offer him a multi-year contract. I think he might get a 1 year extension, and then after that, you know, if he's still performing the way he is, might go to Haas. Who knows? But right now, yeah, I have Logan Sargent on the hot seat. I really do think he needs to pull up his improvement. He really needs to pull up his performance to at least somewhat meet uh uh the standards of Oscar Piastri, or at least, you know, get a couple of positions behind Albon, not so far away that, you know, it just doesn't justify him being a D2 driver. So yeah, Logan Sargent on my hot seat this week.
Yeah, I agree. Like uh, the guy's been in a position a couple times to potentially get points and just can't seem to put it together. And like you said, I think like obviously had an issue with his car, according to James Vowles and team, that led to the crash. But you know, like obviously things keep happening, and he hasn't scored a point. And I think that he either is going to perform, like you said, I think he's going to get another season, but he'll need to perform and at least put a point on the board either before the end of the season or within the first half of next season, where he's definitely going to be like on that out the door.
On the chopping block.
Especially if Albon keeps showing that the car is worthy, and if you're not improving, like you're in F1, you have to show improvement, otherwise there's other people that need that seat. So
Yeah. So let's talk about our predictions for next race. It's gonna be in Monza. Who do you got?
well, I want to see history get made. I want to see 10. I want to see Max go as far as he can go. So I'm gonna have Max on the podium. I just think he's unstoppable unless his car blows up or something random happens. He's gonna be on the podium. And I think you know, if there's a dry track, I think McLaren will continue showing their performance upgrades and get there. I'm gonna put Lando on the podium. And just because I want to see Charles smile at their home race. And I think that if
Poor bastard.
the poor bastard. I think Ferrari, if they get the strategy right and they get the car right and the setup and all that, that they can make the podium. So I'm gonna have Max Lando and Charles.
That's ambitious for you for Charles, and I'm happy for you for that.
Yep.
I got I got Max in P1. Don't really need to explain myself there. I have Alonso in P2. I think he'll make another fight for the front podium, and then yeah, and then I'm actually gonna round it out like you said with Lando Norris. I think there's a stopgap for between their last really great performance and then their next one, and I think that next one's going to come up in Monza. Assuming that the track conditions are all right. So yeah, I think it'll be a fun race. I would love to be proven wrong and see Mercedes, get in there for a P3 or a P2 even. But my hopes are low right now. I'd rather just kind of be surprised later than get my expectations up and get my heart broken.
Well, I definitely think that your predictions are in the realm of more realism than hopeful, like mine are. So,
Yeah.
definitely, I definitely could see that happening. And let's just hope that if Norris gets on the podium with Max, he doesn't break his trophy again. So,
Yeah, I mean, good thing we're not degenerate gamblers, or we'd be going to the books every week with this
yeah.
shit. Cool, Chris. Well, do you have anything you want to plug before we hop out of here?
Yeah, I mean, just want to take this time to like thank everybody, thank our listeners. Like Cheyenne and I really we started this out of like a pure love for the sport, and we want to keep it going as long as possible. And if you love listening to us as much as we love doing this, and we'd love to like have you guys follow, so give us a like, give us a review, and if you have any feedback for us, like let us know. We want to get the conversation going with our fans. Like that's why we started this, to connect with more fans and love for the sport and grow the conversation. So, send us a note. You guys reach us on like any platform of your choice, comment on it, or just send an email to fanteamradio@gmail.com. But yeah, let's get the conversation going.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to get a dialogue going with everyone out there. Let us know what we're saying right. Let us know what we're saying wrong. We're both of us are still learning and incredibly excited to be learning a sport that we fell in love with almost over the past 5 years. So we'll be here again next week for Monza. I'm excited. Hopefully the weather won't delay the race as much as it did this week. But even if it did, I'll stick around to watch it.
100%.
All right, everyone. See y'all next week. Bye.